Hey guys, this is Alexandra from iloveknots.com, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet a cover for a 12-inch styrofoam wreath base. When you go shopping for your styrofoam wreath base, you might find them in green. I got this one at the Dollar Tree. Or you might find them in white. I got this one at Joann's. For this particular project, the fabric is going to be solid, so it doesn't matter which of these two colors you get. You're not going to be able to see it through once you create the cover. I'm going to be using worsted weight yarn. You want a heavy worsted weight yarn. I'm using Red Heart Super Saver, which is one of my favorite yarns for home projects. But Karen 1 Pound and Bernat Super Value are very similar and would be great alternatives. These are going to hold up pretty well to the elements and to fading. It's not going to prevent it. It's going to still be affected by those things. But I really like this yarn for my wreaths and for other home decor projects. I'm using my favorite H8 5mm crochet hook to work with this Red Heart Super Saver. Red Heart Super Saver's yarn, though I love it, is very inconsistent in its size. So sometimes it's thinner than others. You might have 3 skeins in front of you and all of them are a little bit different and require different crochet hooks to get the same size. We're going to be creating a long rectangle that we're going to wrap around the wreath form base. So this is the one that I already finished. Well, I finished crocheting it. I still have to assemble it. And I'm going to come back to this in a while. But as we work across, you're going to want to take your gauge. And that means you're going to want to measure right here across the width. And it's pretty flexible because this yarn is stretchy, but you want at the least 5 3/4 inches across. The goal is 6 1/8 inches, but the least that you could go down to is going to be 5 3/4 inches. The length is a lot easier to work with, and again, it stretches a lot once you start sewing it together, so it's not a huge deal, but we're shooting for 30 3/4 inches long. You can always add more rows than what I'm going to do to get closer to that, but if it's a little bit off, most likely it's going to stretch to fit, so it's not a big deal. I'm going to start with a slip knot. To create a slip knot, I'm going to take my working yarn. I'm going to take the end of it and I'm going to pull it across my palm. Then I'm going to take the yarn that's coming from the skein. I'm going to wrap it around my index finger 2 times. And then I'm going to hold that yarn with my thumb and my middle finger. I'm going to reach behind, pull up this loop. I want to pull it up and over the first loop, but not off my finger. Then I'm going to pull the loop that's behind now, up, over the other loop, and off my finger. And this creates a loop inside that little knot right there. That's a slip knot. Alright, so I have my slip knot here. I'm going to insert my crochet hook into that loop. And I'm going to hold the yarn coming from the skein in my left hand. And the short end is over here on the right side. And I'm just going to pull to tighten. And now we're at normal tension here. We're going to chain 21. And to do a chain, we're going to yarn over and pull through the loop. That's 1 chain. Yarn over, pull through the loop is 2 chains. We want 21 chains. Alright, I have 21 chains here. We're going to work into those chains. This is our foundation. To work our first stitch, we are doing single crochets for the entire project. We are going to skip this first chain right here. That one right there doesn't count. We're going to skip that one and we're going to single crochet into this second one right here. And to do that, I'm going to insert my hook into the chain. I'm going to yarn over, pull the yarn through. I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through both of those loops. That is one single crochet. And that's the stitch pattern we're going to keep using. So let's do that one more time. Insert our hook into the next stitch. Yarn over, pull through. We have 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through both loops. That's 2 single crochets. We're going to continue working all the way across, and at the end of this row we're going to have 20 single crochets. The last stitch, the hole will probably open up. That's because this knot is not secured. So we can just pull it tight so that it's normal tension and that hole will go away. Also, your yarn might start to curl, and that's normal just by the nature of this stitch. So that's nothing to be worried about. We're gonna work back into that and it's gonna flatten out a little bit, even though it might still have a curl. So this is row 1 complete. We have 20 single crochets here. Now we're going to start row 2, and the rest of the cover is going to be worked exactly how row 2 is worked. We are going to chain 1 by yarning over, pull through, that's chain 1, turning our work so that we're working on the opposite side now. This side that we started on, that's the right side, that's the pretty side of the fabric. And now we've turned to work on the wrong side of the fabric, which doesn't look as pretty and defined as the front. We've just chained 1 and turned. We're going to single crochet across the row. The first stitch goes into this very first stitch that you see here. So there's our beginning chain and there's our first single crochet. That's where we're going to insert our hook. Insert your hook into the stitch underneath both of those 2 loops that you see there. It looks like a V. You want to insert your hook under both of those loops. Yarn over, pull through. We have 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops. We've completed 1 single crochet. Let's do that one more time. Insert our hook into the next stitch under both loops at the top there. Yarn over, pull through, 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through both loops. We're going to continue working this way until we reach the end, and at the end you're going to have 20 single crochets. We've just completed row 2, which has 20 single crochets worked here. And it's curling still. That's okay. It's going to keep doing that even when you fasten off at the end. It's going to do that. That's just the nature of this stitch, unfortunately, and the fabric. This is how we're going to continue to work our whole entire wreath cover. The total is going to be 130 rows. And you can count your rows by using that right side and the wrong side. Right now we're still looking at row 2 that we just finished, and if you look at that row, it looks prettier and more defined. and the row that's right underneath it looks a little bit more bumpy and less defined. That's row 1, and this prettier one is row 2. As you work your piece longer and longer, you're going to be able to see that definition more. So this is the same exact view. This is the wrong side of row 1. That's kind of more bumpy, and that is row 2, which is prettier. And it kind of creates these little rows within themselves. I don't know if you can tell, like, that's 2 rows right there, that's 2 rows right there, that's 2 rows right there. So 2, 4, 6 rows. We want 130 rows, and that's going to be about 30 3/4 inches long. If it's a little short, it's very flexible. It's going to stretch to fit. What I like to do when I'm working is I like to use stitch markers to count. I work 50 rows. This is the beginning right here. I worked 50 rows, and then I placed this stitch marker at row 51. Then I continue to work, and then I place this stitch marker at row 101. And this is really helpful so that you don't have to keep going back to the beginning and counting all the rows each time. You can just count from your stitch marker because you know exactly where that is. And this stitch marker I got from Darn Good Yarns in a bag, but they sell these at Joann's and at Hobby Lobby and Amazon and all kinds of places. I just use these because this is what I have, but you can use a safety pin, you can use a bobby pin, you can use just a scrap piece of yarn. I'm going to go ahead and take these off. This is my whole entire piece, 130 rows, and now I'm going to show you how to put it onto the styrofoam wreath base. So after I finished my row 130, I did not cut my yarn. It's still right here. We are going to cut that in a minute though. I'm going to go back to the very beginning tail. This is where I started. And I'm going to go ahead and just weave it in because I don't need that. So we just take our tail end here and we thread it through our tapestry needle. And we're going to weave it into our fabric. We take it up a few stitches underneath the stitches. It's going in between both sides so you can't see it from the right side. This is going to be the front side of my wreath. It doesn't matter which one it is, but I've done it based on the wrong side of the row 1 right here. That's the bumpy, less pretty side. And so I just take my yarn needle up a few stitches and I pull it through. Not too tight because you don't want it to pucker or curl right here on the ends. Now I need to come back down the same exact way. So as you can tell right here, I didn't come out after this stitch. I broke it in half so that the yarn catches on that stitch. So I'm going to go into this one that's above it. You can see this pretty ridge right here. I'm going to go right in the middle of it to break it so my yarn catches better. And I'm going to go right back down all those stitches that I just went through. And I'm going to do the same exact process. I'm going to break the stitch that I'm coming out of and I'm going to pull it through. So that's 2 passes. I do all of my weaving 3 passes. So here's where I just came out of, this stitch right here. So I'm going to insert my needle into this stitch that's right underneath it, the closest one, but I'm going to also break that stitch in half so it catches better. And then I'm going to go back up through the same stitches that I just worked. And I'm going to come out in the same way, breaking the stitch. And I'm going to pull through. And this is 3 passes. Now my yarn is secured. It's not going to come out. There's no way it's going to unravel. It's not preventing my fabric from stretching widthwise. That's why we worked up and down and not side to side. We need that width stretch when we go to sew it on in a minute. So now I can cut this yarn off. And we're going to go back to, well, I have to weave this in, which I will do in a moment. But we're going to go back to this top. Okay, this is like as if I just finished working row 130. I pull up the loop just so I don't lose it, so it doesn't break. And I'm going to be cutting a big piece of yarn here because I'm going to use this to sew my form cover closed. So I want a lot of yarn. And if you don't cut enough, it's okay because you can always add it on later. It's just easier to do it now because it's still attached. That's one less thing that you have to weave in. Now I'm going to take this loop right here and I'm going to pull it. And it's going to get bigger. And I'm just going to keep pulling it until the yarn end that I just cut comes out and it breaks this loop. And here's my tail end. So I'm going to weave that into my yarn needle because we're going to be sewing this closed. And I'm just going to put that on the side for a minute. I'm going to grab my Wreath form, which I'm going to use the green one because I like to make granny square ones too, and I might need that white one. And I'm going to take the end that has the yarn that I just cut that I'm working with, and I'm just going to hug my Wreath form. And it's going to look like, see there's this gap here, so it looks like it doesn't close, but it's absolutely going to close. All you have to do is just stretch it just a little bit and it'll reach right there. So we're going to take the yarn needle that we just threaded. Here's our fabric together. We are going to, I'm going to work counterclockwise because that's what the easiest direction is to go here because my yarn is coming from the bottom. So I want to come up and I'm going to work counterclockwise. So this is the end that the yarn is coming from right here. This is the last stitch of the row. I don't know if you can see that. Right there. That's the last stitch of the row. You want to go pretty close to that edge. Insert your needle to the edge of that stitch. And then back into the same stitch that your yarn tail is coming through, but you're going to work under both loops and not just the one loop in the middle that this is coming out of. Can you see that? Let's see. Okay, so I picked up this edge and now I inserted it under both loops of that other stitch. And I'm going to pull through. And when I pull through, now it is connected. And we're going to continue working the same way. I like to be extra thorough, so I go through my stitches several times. So I'm going to go back into that edge of that first stitch. And I'm going to bring it diagonally to the next stitch of the fabric across. So it's going back into that first stitch there and then into the second stitch over here. And I keep talking about stitches. The stitches that you're looking at are going to be the ends of the rows. So we're going to have, there's row 130, there's row 129, there's row 128 and 127, and ideally you're going to have one stitch at the end of each row. That's the easiest way to gauge it, and you want to make sure that your rows are matching up at all times because it's really easy to get off aligned here. So I just went diagonally from the first row into the next row, and now I'm going to go straight across from where I am. So now I'm working into the beginning of the second row on this side, and I'm working into the as close to the edge as I can, but I want it to be secure. So you can see here I'm picking up 2 loops on my needle, but it's on the edge. That's going to make it secure, and I'm going to go right back into that same stitch on the bottom half. So now I'm working straight down, and I'm going to pull through. And when you pull through, you don't see it hardly at all there. It's going to be barely noticeable. So now I have just worked straight. Now I'm going to work diagonally again. I'm going to go back into that same stitch on the top half, but I'm going to work diagonally across to the third row stitch on that bottom half. And I'm going to pull through. Now I'm going to work straight. So I'm going to go to the third row edge on the top half. And then I'm going to go back down into that third row stitch on the bottom half. Diagonally and then straight. And I'm going to continue this manner all the way across. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it's going to be secure. It's going to look almost like it's not there at all. And it's going to be on the back side of the wreath. So even if you feel like you can see it a lot, you're really not going to see it that much when your wreath is actually being used, because we're looking at this side, but your wreath is actually going to be showing on this side when you hang it up. So go ahead and continue to sew all the way around, and as I get closer, then I will come back to you here. I just wanted to touch base as you're working along. I'm about halfway through, and this is what the yarn that's connected to my tapestry needle looks like. It's all twisted. So if yours does this, which it absolutely will, it's really simple. So when it gets like this, it starts to get tangled and makes knots. Simply hold your wreath up in the air, let the whole entire tail end just hang down. It's gonna unspin itself, and then you can pick right up and continue along sewing. I also wanted to talk about making sure that your rows are meeting up with each other. And it's really simple to see if they are as you're working. It's a little bit harder to see here, but you can see that's 2 rows that are together right there. That's 2 rows. It looks identical on the other side. That's the 2 rows that meet up right here with these 2 rows. These 2 rows here meet up with these 2 rows. It's a little hard to see on camera, but in person right in front of you, it's going to be much easier for you to differentiate it. So just make sure as you're working that you are pinching together and holding in position so that your rows are matching up, so that when you sew it, it will automatically come out perfect. I have gotten to a point where I am now out of yarn, even though I haven't finished. So I wanted to go ahead and address this now. It's really easy to add more yarn. The only thing you're going to do is pretty much what you always do. You're going to take this tail end, insert it into a stitch so that you can come out on the wrong side, which is the side that's going to be on top of the styrofoam wreath. It's the side that you're not going to see. We're going to weave this tail end through. You want to do it down, up, down 3 times. Then you're just going to start, you're going to cut another piece of yarn. You're going to thread it through your tapestry needle, and you're going to start from the opposite side. So you're weaving your end in here. You're going to attach your yarn on the other side so it's not additional bulkiness, and it's going to be in the same starting position as you were in the beginning. You will start down here a few stitches. You will weave your ends in a few stitches. That's the first pass. You will come back down, back up for 3 passes. Then you will take your needle out of the bottom side and you will begin again. The same exact way as you did in the beginning is how this is going to look. And we're going to continue working all the way until we finish this. And I just wanted to let you know now that it might look like you're going to have a gap when you get to the end, but it's no big deal because it's going to stretch to fit. So don't take this apart or add any extra rows. It will fit in the end. So I just finished my second to last stitch right here, and now I have just this little gap to close up right here where the first 2 stitches of the foundation are, and so I'm just going to go ahead and pick them up as normal and close up this stitch. And you don't need to worry about your end being super even here because now we're going to sew it together to the first half. And we see this gap right here. This gap is no big deal because we are going to stretch this, and when you stretch it from the bottom, all the fabric in general, it's gonna come together and it's going to close perfectly. So here's our seam that we have sewn the two ends together. We want to line that up right here, line it up with each other so that we sew it like that as well. So I just came out of this stitch right here. I'm just going to take my needle down into the first stitch that I joined to right there. And I'm going to pick up the corresponding stitch on the other side of the fabric. And I'm over a little bit because my seam is here, my seam is here. So it's not lined up perfectly, but I want to make sure that I pick up the right stitches so that when it's sewn together, it lines up perfectly. And that's the first stitch. And we're just going to keep working the same way that we sewed the other edges together. That's how we're going to sew this edge. It's going to be a little tighter to work with because now you're working straight up against the styrofoam, whereas before you had a little bit of leeway from the extra fabric. So just be patient, take your time. It's much easier to see the stitches that you are picking up and sewing together now because this is the foundation row chains and this is the stitches from the last row. So just match those up and sew all the way around. So now that I'm back to the beginning here, I've sewn all the way around. I'm just going to weave my end in and I'm going to try to do it into the seam that was created when we joined the two edges, so that it doesn't add bulkiness anywhere else and it's kind of hidden into the big seam that's already there. I'm going to do 3 passes just like I normally do. That is what I do every single time. Unless I feel like it's not secure, I'll add some more, but 3 is pretty good. So there's 1 pass. Now I'm coming back into the same stitches I just worked. But I'm having to be careful because right here I just picked up some of this stitch right here on my needle. I don't want to do that. Or it could pull the stitch out. And I don't want it to be too tight because I don't want it to bunch up. So that's why I'm just loosening it up a little bit right here. 1 more pass. I think 2 could actually probably be good because this is already thick enough and it's catching the yarn really well. But let's just play it safe, do our 3, and I am done there. Fasten that off. And now, this is the seam that I just finished. It's barely noticeable, but you can either put embellishments on top of that and you won't see it at all, or you can put your hanger there and you still won't see it at all. And this is the front of our piece. It is absolutely beautiful. And then on the back of it is going to be where the seam is. And if it looks a little wonky, it's so easy just to twist it and get that seam exactly where you want it to be, so the front looks even better. And now I'm going to show you how to make the crocheted hanger that goes right here. It's going to have a slit in it that goes over the actual hanger itself. So you wouldn't use this if you're using the type of hanger that your wreath sits in. You're going to use this if it's the type of hanger that is just like a metal loop. I just ripped out what I showed you earlier. For the wreath hanger, we're going to use the same exact hook and yarn. If you want your ringer to be a different color to better match your embellishments, go for it. I have done that and it looks so great. But if you want it to blend in, just use the same exact yarn. We're going to make a slip knot the same exact way as we always do. And I'm going to start with a chain 43. Alright, I have chain 43. I'm going to single crochet into the second chain. So remember, we always skip that first one right there. We're going to single crochet into the second one. And into each stitch, each chain all the way across, at the end of this row, you're going to have 42 single crochets. Alright, I have 42 single crochets worked. Don't forget that this curl is going to happen, and it's okay because we're going to straighten it out here in a moment. For row 2, we're going to chain 1 and turn. This part we're going to create the holes for the hook to go through. So we're going to single crochet into the very first stitch and into the next 3 stitches here. So that's a total of 4 single crochets in the beginning. Now we're going to chain 4. We're going to skip the next 4 single crochets. We're going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4, and that very next one we're going to single crochet into. And now you've created a buttonhole. And you're going to crochet 25 more single crochets, so it'll be 26 total here in the middle. "26 single crochets done. Now I am going to chain 4. I am going to skip the next 4 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that leaves us with 4 single crochets left. So I'm going to insert my hook into that next one, work a single crochet, and work 3 more single crochets. And now we have a second buttonhole. That's what's going to go through the hanging loop. For row 3, we're going to chain 1 and turn. We're going to single crochet into those first 4 single crochets. Now we are going to work into this space right here. And sometimes we work directly into the chains, but for this particular project, you can, if you want to, you can work into each one of those 4 chains. I'm just going to work 4 single crochets into the chain space itself. And to do that, I'm just inserting right into the space underneath the whole entire chain, yarning over, pull through, and then the same process for a single crochet. Now I'm going to single crochet into those 26 that are right there in the center. single crochet 4 into that chain space, and now single crochet into the last 4 single crochets. For row 4, we're going to chain 1 and turn, and we're just going to single crochet into each stitch all the way across. So at the end of this row, you're going to have the same 42 single crochets. We're going to work one more row. It's going to be a border around the whole entire piece. It's going to give it a clean, finished look and a little bit more stability and width here. So we've just done 4 rows, and to begin the border, it's going to be, we're going to chain 1 and turn. We're going to work all the way around the whole entire piece. And when we get back and we work our last stitch here, we're going to slip stitch join to the first. So I'm chaining 1 and turning. And I'm going to do the same exact thing as row 4. I'm just going to single crochet into the first stitch and into each stitch across this row. And when I get to that last stitch of the row, I'm going to single crochet into it. But this is a corner and I want it to be rounded and flat. So I'm going to chain 1 and work 1 more single crochet into that same exact stitch. And by doing that, it's going to round the edges and it's still going to lay flat. Now we're going to work down the side of these rows here. It is 1 single crochet per row, and you're going to see it's quite easy to find here. There's 1 row right here. There's 1. That's the next single crochet. Then the next one is that hole right there in the middle. That's the next row. That's the next single crochet. And then we have another row down here, right here. Insert under both loops of that side, complete the single crochet, and now we have the very first foundation chain there, and we're going to do the same thing we did in this corner. Single crochet, chain 1, single crochet into the same exact stitch. And we can pull that tight, and now we're going to turn and work on the opposite side of the foundation chains right here across the bottom, the same exact way as you would on the top. Treat each one that you see there as a stitch. And when we get back to the beginning, we're going to do the same exact thing for the edge. Single crochet, chain 1, single crochet into the same stitch, single crochet up the side by working into the end of the rows. And when I get to places like this, where that hole is like really large, I try to work into the edge of the stitch, working under both loops that are there on the edge. There's 2 loops there, as opposed to that hole in the center, because it will make the hole look bigger. And here we're back to the beginning. So this is the very first single crochet we worked. We're going to work 1 more single crochet into that stitch, and we're going to skip the chain because we're slip stitching. It's going to equal the same length. Insert our hook under both loops of that first stitch, yarn over, pull through that loop, and pull through the loop that's on your hook. That's a slip stitch. We've completed the row, the round, and now our hanger is ready. We just fasten off, weave in our ends, and then we can put it on our wreath. I'm going to show you what it looks like really quickly before I weave in my ends. You just slide it underneath your wreath. You put the 2 buttonholes together, and your hook is going to go right through those buttonholes, and it will hold your wreath up on a wreath hanger. And I just wanted you to see what it looks like when it is hanging on my door. It is on a nail, but if you had the metal hanger from the top, that's where it would fit, right into that slit. And now it's ready for you to glue on all kinds of embellishments that you want, flowers, signs. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please subscribe to my channel. Leave me a note in the comments below telling me what videos you'd like to see on my brand new YouTube channel. And also check out my blog, iloveknots.com. I share free crochet patterns there, yarn giveaways, and all kinds of yarn related crafts and goodies. Thank you.